have lots to talk about. I mean, there is so much news that have gone on. So obviously we are in a pro-growth economy. That's what we're reading. And so much news. We saw a all-time high this week, backed off a little bit.
Yep.
But clearly Trump and everything that he's talking about is certainly on everyone's tongue.
It is, and I have to give some credit to one of our excellent CSMs, the client service managers, Carl. He had told me about how we did not have a Santa Claus rally, but maybe it was just a Santa Claus rally postponed because everybody was waiting for the election to see what would happen. I think that does make a lot of sense. We had that anticipation, right? You had the election uncertainty, that was resolved, but then there was the policy uncertainty that we were waiting for. That first day in office, the 26 memos, the presidential memos, executive orders, the one thing that really wasn't there was slapping tariffs on our trading partners. And I think the markets really appreciated that.
And if you look at who they were with, especially with Canada and Mexico, it can be negotiating. Of course, he's trying to put them in an uncomfortable position. It's certainly going to get their attention. And ironically, the one partner that was really going to get targeted was China. And he said he met with Xi, and we're not going to have tariffs. So I think we're going to have to wait and see.
Exactly. And that's the danger of assuming the worst, right? Is if you assume that he's going to slap them on those countries and then it doesn't happen, you can be caught flat-footed. That's one of the reasons why coming in, you were, I think, very astute in saying, let's wait to see the facts and the circumstances. How does it change? Don't try to anticipate it. Don't try to speculate. And really, when I looked at the announcements that came out as it related to tariffs, it really seemed like it's more focused right now, at least, on like fentanyl and the trying to stem the flow of that into the United States.
All in with that.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people could agree that is an issue, probably a proper use of tariffs if they're not going to cooperate. But it also seems solvable, something that they should be willing to go along with.
So we have obviously tariffs that we talked about. The other thing is obviously immigration. These were two issues that he ran on. I believe he was elected on. And immigration news was coming out already, but I am a little confused about the undocumented.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are being thrown out there as facts that are not necessarily facts. There's been a number of reports about how, as an example, like in the construction industry, we know from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that about 30% of the people in construction are foreign-born. Okay. Now, if they're in that survey, they are documented workers. They are legal workers. But now the Pew Research Center and a couple of immigration advocacy groups, they have said that maybe 13% of those individuals are undocumented. And the fact is, we don't know. I mean, by definition, they're undocumented, right, so you can't count them. And I can't imagine going to a job site and doing a survey. Okay, who has their papers here, right? To somebody who's doing a survey and then giving an honest answer.
I'm the undocumented guy.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really a good point. So I don't think we're going to be able to count them. So and then of course the other issue is he's demanding that interest rates go down. I'm saying Trump is demanding that interest rates go down. Now he really doesn't have that pull, but the S&P 500 is really running on this 1995 rate cut path.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that when Chair Powell started cutting rates back in September, he said that he thought this could play out like 1994 to 1995, which was that soft landing scenario where they were able to hike rates, hold them, and then start cutting them, and we didn't get a recession. For a little while there, the market, the S&P 500, was kind of tracking 1995. There was another instance in 1989 where they were able to hike and then cut and not have a recession. The market had been kind of following that path, deviated a little bit around the election because, during that period of time, obviously things have changed, but it has really gotten back in line with that 95 rate hiking path. So as far as I can tell, just by looking at the movements in the markets, the equity markets are saying that it's still a soft landing scenario.
So we have soft landing, obviously, which is not a recession. A hard landing would be a recession. Yep. But I will tell you, Brian, I had a flight into Milwaukee this past week, and we're on final, and the plows came out. So we went around, and we took a couple of trips around Lake Michigan, and we were in a holding pattern. And perhaps the market's in a holding pattern. It's neither a hard landing nor a soft landing.
There you go. I really like that analogy. That's a good one because, who says you have to land, right? I mean, the economy, it should keep growing.
Chugging along,
That's
positive
right.
GDP.
And really, that's what happened for a good stretch of the post-global financial crisis period up until 2019. We had a very long economic expansion. And there were a couple periods of times where it looked like things were getting a little winded, but then all of a sudden the economy got its second wind and then a third wind. And I think that is something we could have here. And the key thing that I'm looking at are, now that we're in earnings season here, is how strong and broad earnings growth really does look like it is. Because a fundamental driver of the markets over the long term are earnings. And what we have seen so far, and it's still early days with earnings season, is that the equally weighted S&P 500, so instead of having a market cap weighted one where it's so dominated by the big tech companies, if you consider some of the smaller companies in the S&P 500, those earnings growth are actually looking a little bit better. So maybe they're catching a little bit of a wind here.
No, that's funny because our associate here in the studio, Andy, he told me he gets winded when he runs up and down the stairs. So, who do we need to produce right now? Some of these earnings, we're expecting really good numbers right now from the earnings, and I think if you're in position properly right now, you are going to participate, and that is what the takeaway is. What does your portfolio look like? How are you positioned?